Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Moore. I worked on the failed Psychedelics ballot measure campaign last year in Massachusetts, and I'm excited to be moderating this panel on psychedelics and cannabis today with some great people in the functional mushrooms and cannabis industry. I'm very passionate about the synergy between the cannabis industry and the nascent psychedelics industry. I use cannabis as a psychedelic. My preferred way of consuming cannabis is eating the whole flower toasted, and then I go on these 8-hour journeys, and it's helped me work through things. I suffered from trauma related to the suicide of my best friend when I was 21, and also severe obsessive compulsive disorder. And I've had experiences where I've taken cannabis flower, I've seen the world radically differently, and in the days, weeks, and months that followed, I've actually been able to interact with the world radically differently and have dramatically reduced OCD symptoms. I've also frequently combined cannabis with magic mushrooms, particularly magic mushroom microdoses. One of the most profound experiences I ever had in terms of my own mental health and growth was taking cannabis flower and then combining it with magic mushroom. And I woke up the next day, and my OCD, which had been debilitating, had been reduced by 90%. And I was able to touch all these things in my house that I hadn't been able to touch. I was able to go outside and leave my room in a way I hadn't been able to before. And it was in the days that followed where I became so passionate that everybody deserves access to this kind of healing and this treatment legally. And I think that the cannabis industry and psychedelics industries will really rise and fall together, and we have to stick together, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned. So I'm happy to jump off this panel by letting our speakers introduce themselves and then diving into some questions about how cannabis can inform psychedelics and vice versa as we move forward. So thank you very much for being here.
Cool. Thank you, Graham. My name is Chris Lovett. Pleasure to be here. Thank you to everyone, this massive audience here listening to us talk about psychedelics and cannabis. Yes, make some noise. We love it. Personally, my experience in the cannabis industry is primarily as a personal user, as an avid advocate and partaker in cannabis. I've been using cannabis since I was a young teen, and followed shortly thereafter with my psychedelic experience. And to Graham's point, I think there is so much intertwining. You know, you hear the cliche, cannabis is a gateway drug, and I think it, in so many ways, it was for me, but into plant medicine specifically, helping me understand the potency of the medicine of the earth, which brought me to start a company called MYFEELIUM, which we founded earlier this year as a functional mushroom and microdosing company, where we are actually combining psilocybin with functional mushrooms and other herbs and adaptogens to create an array of stacks that use, again, the medicine of the earth to help steer people away from what's being prescribed to us, kind of over-prescribed to us in so many ways. So yeah, excited to be here and excited to talk about what we're seeing on the path towards legalization and decriminalization. And yeah.
Hi. Well, it was great to hear your story. I appreciate that so much. I kind of came into the cannabis world, I guess, as a patient myself. I have an eye condition that impacted me, and I had pain in my eyes. I started using cannabis and making a tincture, and it benefited me, and that led to the creation of Howls, which is the name of my company. It's a plant medicine company. We currently are known for our tincture in particular, and you know, the purpose and the mission of it has been about access to the plant in a way that it has been accessed for thousands of years. So we focus on traditional methods of production, capturing the whole plant, really using tried and true methods to bring it to people and making sure there's access in the newly formed marketplaces for that type of product. And as someone who had been I have had the good fortune of having access to and having participated in multiple different psychedelic communities, entheogenic practitioners of different communities who have traditional practices to use entheogens and psychedelics, and that is informed significantly my perception of the value of them and how we should introduce them. So I have a lot, I guess, since this panel was, I was put on this panel, I've had a lot of thoughts and I'm excited to share them, but that's a basic introduction to me. My name's Peter, and regardless, and just to your point, each of us individually contains multitudes. We are here to talk about psychedelics, so I think being aware of that, whether we're talking with one person or 1,000, it's an extraordinary opportunity for us to access the power of these plants and to share it. So anything you learn today, I hope you bring to others to help to share this information and the word about these valuable plants.
Hello, my name is Kaylee Hepburn, and I came into the cannabis space in a little bit of a different way. I started off as an attorney doing compliance work, and through that I started doing a lot of research, mostly on taboo reversal and how the propaganda campaign was massively successful and how it made such a beautiful plant criminal when it never should have been, and it could have saved a lot of things. So I started figuring out that education was the way to get people to change the laws and change the rules and increase access, maybe decrease price and make it more accessible to everyone. So right now I run a cannabis delivery company, a home delivery company. It's pretty new, so we're just figuring out the marketplace and what people like and what they don't like. And I'm still focused on research, and I was talking to my mother this morning and I realized that my interests have kind of come full circle since I was in college 15 years ago or so, and my favorite class was psychobiology. And then I was reading this morning when I was getting ready for this, reading about using cannabis for depression and to help, soothe the mind and reduce pain, and then you use mushrooms to relax the neurons so that hopefully that sticks, and using those things together when you have more research and more education can be a really amazing tool. So I'm just really interested in keep researching that and making things more accessible and talking to people.
Thank you so much to all three of you. So Katie, I think your wonderful comments help lead into our first question, which is what are the lessons that the nascent psychedelics movement, psychedelics legalization movement can take from the experiences of advocates like yourself and Peter, who helped make cannabis less stigmatized and legally available so we can have this wonderful event today without getting arrested. So please, if you could expound a little bit on how you think psychedelics legalization could be informed by the experience of cannabis, that would be awesome. So we can start with you, Katie.
I think one of the big things would be having a lot of people working on the new rules so that there's not just regulators and not just people looking at it from the outside, but you have people from the cannabis industry who are in the middle of it and who know, you can say all day you need to do A, B, and C to get to where you want to be, but if you're not inside of it and actually doing it, it's really tough to tell other people what to do. So I think that on top of education is really going to help make these regulations work and make things so that you don't have to keep changing them all the time, and they work better out the gate.
I think the first thing I want to talk about is just I see this beyond first and foremost as a human rights issue, and I think seeing things through that prism is really important. When we're talking about these plants and these plant medicines, they've been used for a long time. They're thousands of years. They are, we as humans, it's our right to be able to use them. And so I think that that's something that has that's understandable, but also truthful. And so I think one of the ways we can distinguish ourselves and improve upon how cannabis, in particularly recent times, a market has been created, and legalization and how it's been defined has been very much around the financial opportunity. But I think it actually became first normalized and decriminalized and legalized through the prism of patients and through the prism of the rights to use and to choose what you put in your own body. And I think one thing we could learn is for those of us who advocate for the plant to retain that advocacy as the financial opportunities arise, and to understand the distinctions between access to plant medicine and creating a market, and have our advocacy be both to retain the advocacy for the plant as the markets are created. So I think human right perspective is really important. The second part of that is I think that the way that I think one thing we could learn from the cannabis industry is a lot of the legal industry was developed from investors who came in from tech, who came in from unicorn type of perspective, where we put tons of money in for fast growth, high scale. Some people lose, some people win, but that's based on, and move fast and break things. But the result of that, the reason, and I'm not saying that to say this is a non-judgment about how people approach their business, but I don't think it relates to an agricultural product that's also a plant medicine product. And we've seen the result in that is enormous, rapid investment by people with that perspective that grew and crashed. And a lot of money has been lost, a lot of jobs have been lost, and I think it was a matter of misunderstanding the type of industry. So I think we should be careful about the expectations and who we're bringing in as investors and how they want people to approach. So instead of thinking about, Y Combinator type of approach, think about like a Warren Buffett type of, like value investing. This is something long-term value for people, and it will continue to have value, and we want to build it that way and really bring in investors with that point of view, because we're seeing now a real loss of access to the most valuable methods of the sort of highest quality, best processes, best perspective on cannabis, because of a desperate attempt to meet the expectations of people who went through thing. You can make changes on ones and zeros rapidly across large scale. You can't do that with a plant, and and you can't rapidly scale in the same way. So I think we should learn that lesson as people in this industry. And then I think the third thing is really I think we should continue to advocate and make distinct the difference between the plant and plant medicines that grow and have been naturally used, and what we're advocating for the right to have access to, versus chemical derivatives that have been introduced, whether right now or in the past 30 or 40 years. I think there is a big distinction between a mushroom and ketamine. And I think that even though ketamine's been around a while, there might be a lot of benefits for it. There's a process by which chemically derived new substances are introduced to the public, and that should allow those to go through that. If you want to make big money on that type of thing, enter the pharmaceutical process, create it and succeed there. And we should focus on access to naturally occurring plants in terms of immediate decriminalization and availability for everybody. And then the final piece of that is the derivatives from the plant. There should be some kind of line that separates when the plant, which we have a right to access because people always have and always will, and it's generally regarded as safe because of the long-term use around the world, from extracting out individual components, combining it with other additives, and turning it into something which humans do not expect in their bodies, and we don't know the long-term impact. So I'm a businessman, and I recognize the value of doing things that can be more repeated and you can make more money, but I also start from a place of like a human rights advocacy, and I think we should build a market first for those plants, and then allow a more regulated system for derivatives and chemical analogs and things that should have a longer approval process to prove that they are safe and effective for long-term use.
Thank you so much, Katie and Peter. Those were a lot of great points. I just want to quickly say that I think it was a huge mistake of the Psychedelics campaign last year to frame the issue as a medical technology issue versus a human rights issue. I see it very similarly, and I think that would have been more effective, because when you frame it as a medical technology issue, a lot of people rightfully bring up, this isn't FDA approved. This isn't going to be available through the mainstream healthcare system. Why are we jumping the gun here? And there isn't really a good answer to that unless you either are dishonest, or then you bring in the human rights angle, the fact that people are dying now, the fact that people are benefiting now, and why should they be prosecuted for something that's not hurting anyone and is in fact helping them live better, safer, more functional lives. But we didn't do that, and we lost, and I think it's something important to remember moving forward, that the human rights angle is really compelling and easy to defend on its merits. So with that, I'd like to transition to Chris and ask him to talk a little bit about how cannabis, psychedelics, and functional mushrooms, which he sells, are maybe not as different as a lot of people think. I think a really important thing to bring up is that psilocybin mushrooms, for example, or even something as powerful as ayahuasca or ibogaine, they have dose-dependent effects. So we've normalized tripping and taking a huge amount of mushrooms and having a certain kind of experience. But as Chris said, people are microdosing, people are taking smaller doses. And if you were to take a super high dose of something available over the counter, like Benadryl, you could end up in the hospital, you could end up dead. We normalize that, yet we demonize these things that if you take too much, you're likely to feel a lot better for the rest of your life afterward. So, Chris, I'd love you to just talk about some of the overlap and synergy and how these things actually aren't so different, both from a business perspective and a consumer perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I think realistically, and just a closing thought on the last topic, and I think it transitions nicely into this, is there are so many similarities, and as we think about how the psychedelic advocacy movement and the decrim efforts will likely follow cannabis, it's so important to realize that it's a lot of the same constituency. It's so important to mobilize the people that voted yes on cannabis to have them vote yes on psychedelics, because, I mean, the understanding of the power of plant medicine is so crucial to the success of this. And so as we really look towards how psychedelics and cannabis intertwine, both from a psychoactive perspective as well as from a decrim effort perspective, I mean, yeah, I microdose every day. I take psilocybin almost every day. I had a child at the beginning of November, and I don't know if I would have handled the trials and tribulations of fatherhood as well as I have without psychedelics. I mean, the patience that it has granted me, the ability to truly create space between myself and the moment, myself and my emotion, the emotional regulation that's been created through psychedelics, through psilocybin, is unparalleled. And through that, as we look to the pharmaceutical industry and what's being overprescribed to us as a society, there are so many things that are so much worse for us than these plants, than these medicines that have been granted to us from Mother Earth. And so for us to discount them, and for our people to truly look at the narrative that's being spun and the taboo nature of these products and subscribe to it as heavily as we do is something that we really need to come together and change people's mind on. Like, we don't do it alone. Like, this is a communal effort. We need to be the one out here speaking to these benefits and helping people understand. Like, I talk to my parents and say, oh, I'm starting a company about mushrooms, and their mind automatically goes to tripping balls. Like, my dad's a deadhead. I don't know if you guys have heard of Lobsters from Mars. My dad's the drummer of that band, local Grateful Dead tribute band, shout out. But they are, they come from this era of psychedelic use, of an understanding of the summer of love, and yet still they also have this thought that is this stigma around psychedelics, that it is something that is going to send you to the moon, and it doesn't have to be that way. And when we can spin the narrative, when we can destigmatize these things and help people understand that this is truly a powerful medicine that can be broken down in a way that doesn't have to have these potent psychoactive effects all at once, I think I think we can change a lot of people's minds. And when we really think about the efforts, the uphill battle that's in front of us towards legalizing this, it's going to be these one-off conversations. It's going to be us coming together and looking at this as a human rights movement to help people just get back to their roots, get back to what has always been ours, get back to what we know will forever benefit us. It's the wisdom of the universe is in these plants, and for some reason they're being blocked. And so it's on us to really change that narrative.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I think for our next topic, I want to address the dark side of these plants, cannabis and psychedelics, and plant-based psychedelics, that because of the stigma that exists, because of the legal prohibition, have an outsized impact on popular narratives. So people do have bad trips, people do have lasting negative effects from using something like psilocybin, although it's not very common. And people get addicted to cannabis. Starting with you, Katie, how do you think is the right way to balance accessibility with safety, and what's the right way to address this as industry and a plant medicine community so that people who have had negative experiences, who have had loved ones who've become addicted or have been destabilized by these plants, feel listened to, feel respected, and feel safe within our community?
I think a big part of that would be education and teaching about moderation. Most things are much better in moderation, so if people learn the best way to use it, and if they are not listening, I get a lot of questions about why people think that cannabis is a gateway drug, and I think that cannabis is absolutely not a gateway drug. The situations around it make it a gateway drug, so that when you're in a situation where you're looking for something that's illegal, there's more illegal things around you that are probably worse for you than cannabis isn't bad for you. So when you're going somewhere illegal to get it, then it ends up turning into a gateway situation. But I like to switch it and talk about how you can actually use cannabis and now psychedelics to help with substance abuse issues. So they can actually use them in the exact opposite way that they were telling you that they could use them. And you can use something that is simple and from the earth to correct a huge problem. So I guess I like to talk about it more that way.
Peter?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to, first of all, congratulations on the birth of your child. That's awesome. That's a psychedelic experience. I think in my I've also have a kid. Just suddenly there's a life that was not there before, and real rebirth. But that I guess what I think I want to take a little issue. I disagree on some level with the fear of large dosage. That is the way that I think the issue is the container upon which people are using large doses. So I think that one of the major things that's important to distinguish this movement versus the cannabis movement is we're not going to use the stigma that people have about the product in order to create an alternative use case that's considered better. So I understand the value of microdosing, and I know people who do it, and it's hugely beneficial, and nothing against it, but the most common usage of psychedelics has been within cultural containers that have been around for thousands of years with a guide, and you take large doses. In fact, often when you're having a bad experience, what you'll hear from the background is more medicine. You need more. So I think that it's not, but I think that the other issue is that we are not the ones who necessarily are the ones to be leading that effort based upon what I've heard, because that we don't necessarily come from that tradition or culture. But I think we should be advocating equally and not using large doses as a counterpoint, not going into the fear of that is why it should be legal, is that now you can do it in small doses and that's okay, because I think there's two reasons for that. One is that it's unfortunately, I think, throwing that traditional use under the bus a bit. But secondly, I think it's a good business to have people use something every day and manage their anxiety, manage their depression. So that, we live in a capitalist culture. This is America. Business is going to want to gear towards something that's going to be most profitable, which is consistent, regular use for a chronic issue. But large dosage in the right container can, you can manage your anxiety day to day with a product, or you can go 2 or 3 times and not have anxiety. So which one's more profitable? You know which one it is. And I'm a company, we make a tincture, we'll probably have, I think it's beneficial. And I recognize that, but I think that it's really important that we advocate for with decriminalization, any legal framework creating a system of people can be certified as guides. They're doing this in Oregon, and that's within the cultural context of our world, so probably that's through therapeutic or social workers who are trained in these ways and can bring people along in large dose experiences and find the benefits of that, within also an exception for people to be certified if they come from a cultural tradition that already uses these. Well, you know, there's in the Southwest, there are Native American indigenous tribes who currently it's legal for peyote to be used because it went to the Supreme Court. Freedom of religion has legalized entheogens and psychedelics in this country. What we're talking about now is legalization for the purpose of commerce in some ways, and so I think we should be aware of that distinction between decriminalization for the purpose of access. So all of this is to say that I think it's that I understand and appreciate the opportunities involved with microdosing and what that can bring, but I think that as advocates, we just should bring along and create systems at the same time that is for clear, you know, we need guides. One of the reasons people had bad trips or bad experiences or the 60s Summer of Love is, you know, it's being led by recent college grads who took a bunch of mushrooms and they come from wealthy families and they're like, I'm going to change the world because I just discovered mushrooms, and I'm probably one of those people at some point in my life. But having been engaged with people who've used it for so long, I think we just got to advocate for long-term training and certification of guides who can bring people into large dose experiences to get the benefits that we have the right to have for a long time, and not to feel that we're going to end up that large dose is going to be a bad thing. You just shouldn't do it willy-nilly. I agree, it needs to be responsible and respectful in how you do it. So any legalization should create systems for access for large doses as well as microdosing. And I would always take issue if people are advocating and making that contrast, that one is bad and the other is good, because I disagree, and I think that there's no evidence for that other than cultural bias in America.
Right there with you. I mean, it's yes and, right? It's all of it. You don't get one without the other. And I mean, some of the most profound experiences that I think probably all of us have had have been on macro doses and deep ceremonial experiences and the ceremony behind it. And we look to the evolution of the space, and we're truly seeing that the facilitation components, the integration components, the psychotherapy, this is big business. You know, there's so many organizations coming out, teaching, guiding, helping to prepare this next wave of people into, okay, how do we prepare? How do we truly make sure that we can do this responsibly, that we can avoid the bad actors, that we can make sure that the people that are supposed to be facilitating this, that are supposed to be doing this, are the ones that are doing it, as opposed to the ones that are coming with the intention of commerce, that are coming in with the capitalistic greed. And I think so much of what we're trying to do is understanding, how do we unify, how do we give back, how do we come together, how do we align with the cannabis organizations, with the marketplaces, with all of these organizations, with the microdose, with the macrodose, with really everybody that's touching this. How do we come together and work together as a unified segment, as opposed to compartmentalized and everybody in it for their own self-interest? So, yeah, I think, again, we all have to work together on it.
Thank you so much, Chris and Peter. I especially appreciate Peter kind of correcting, I'm realizing, my internalized sort of stigma towards the high doses, even though I've taken high doses myself. And I think it's really important that advocates advocate full-throatedly for people's right to try higher doses as well as smaller doses. And I agree that higher doses have a uniquely powerful therapeutic value for a lot of people. So this brings me to the next question, which is, how do you all think the nascent psychedelic industry and cannabis industry either should be regulated distinctly or regulated similarly? My bias coming into this is I would prefer them to be regulated essentially the same. I'd like to be able to purchase psilocybin mushrooms where I purchase cannabis flower, and I'd even like there to be guides or facilitators who work with cannabis as a psychedelic. However, people have different feelings on this. So starting with Katie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these industries should either be regulated together or regulated separately, and what are some of the nuances distinguishing the two?
Honestly, I'm not really sure. I think there should be some similarities and some differences. I like the idea that you were talking about earlier about the apothecary method. So you can go into a store and you can pick up all of the herbs that you're looking for. You can get cannabis, you can get psilocybin, you can get any number of herbs in one location, and you can get the wellness and the education and the people who know what they're talking about to teach you how to use them and how to combine them. So I like that aspect. And also, to Peter's point, I think that using guides and having maybe retreat situations or like centers where you can really use the macro doses in a safe way would be something that should be looked at really carefully, and so that there's more access to it, and it's not the $5,000-$10,000 that I've seen that they can cost, so that they're not accessible. So I think that in some ways it should be the same, and in some ways it should be a little bit different, because I don't think that really would apply to cannabis, but for psychedelics it sounds like a really great thing to do.
Thank you. Peter, if you wouldn't mind giving your thoughts.
Yeah, my first impulse is, free the plant, let these things be available and together. I do think they're very distinct in their properties, and so before that, I think that they're, like just put into dispensaries. Creating these systems of access for the guides and those things are important, because I think that then there'll be a lot less because that, again, I think one of the issues is unintentional use or recreational use as your first point of view, because you have you've seen something fun in a movie, or you've read about the 60s and you want to do a recreational activity around this and you go for it. I think I'd be hesitant to just throw it into our current dispensary system, especially knowing the dispensaries well, as someone who has a product in a lot of dispensaries, and that many of them, I don't think, some of them, all the bud tenders are amazing. I love the way that they care about educating people and talking to people, but these are retail environments in which we're trying to rapidly move people through transactions, so being able to guide from that position feels unlikely. So I think maybe more back to where there was the medical dispensary model, potentially, where there are people there who have time to sit with you, where it is integrated with other ways of learning about the macrodose. And but I frankly am not. I in the ideal world, apothecary with plants of all kinds together with wise people sharing it is, the dream version of it. But I wonder if we're culturally and systemically prepared to do that. I think that would be my concern, is that the drive to get it available will mean that we're not really presenting a framework or a container for people to access it that honors what they're going to be getting. So I just want to balance those things, but I don't know what the right answer is for that. So it feels like a shortcut. Oh, you got cannabis stores, let's throw some much, and I think that that's another thing we should be cautious of. We want to do it the right way the first time, because we want to at least consider these things before we rush to it. I honestly don't think that the money available, I think that's another thing. I think I've known a lot of people who sold mushrooms on the illicit market. Weed makes a lot more money. A lot more people use it. It's a lot more profitable. So I feel like it's also, I think that the rush to get into a marketplace for financial gain may also have some backfiring effects in terms of rush to invest large amounts of money in something which is not as profitable as people expect it to be, unless they come up with a patent medicine they can send as a pharmaceutical.
Thank you, Peter. Chris?
Yeah. I'm right there. I think we don't know. We don't really have all the answers, but I can say, okay, let's look at what's happening right now, right? We look at the decrim efforts. I know the bill in Maine was just tabled, right? So we're seeing possession really start to kind of fall into this decrim movement, and having these products is becoming less of a less of a punishable penalty. But then you look at New Mexico, and they legalized psilocybin for therapeutic use. So you're gonna have to use it in a guided setting. And so I think as we think about kind of what you guys have talked about, okay, are we putting it in dispensaries, or what's the setting that this truly exists in a sustainable way? I think it's hard because like I don't really mind if somebody smoked a joint and got behind the wheel, but if somebody ate an eighth of mushrooms and got behind the wheel, like not super stoked about that. So I think there does have to be some additional regulation. I think, what does that look like? I don't know. I mean, if we can come in and really start to understand, okay, what is the setting in which you're going to be consuming this, and how do we start to regulate that? Like, is there a way to do that? No, I don't think so. So I think it has to come in. It has to be incorporating, at least for the macro experiences, we have to be incorporating some degree of therapy, some degree of guidance. To your point, talking about the integration, talking about the preparatory components of really getting the maximum benefits out of the macro experience, and also understanding that the underground will always exist. And let's be real, the recreational component of mushrooms is awesome. It's very fun, and I think there's a lot of benefit to have to take from that. But if we're thinking about how do we regulate this, I don't think we can see this in a dispensary with the same, right alongside cannabis, at least from the perspective of putting a chocolate bar that has an eighth of mushrooms right next to an eighth of weed. Like they're psychoactively, they're gonna have very different effects, and we have to understand that. We have to be careful of that. And I don't know, is there a way where we can put the microdoses on the counter and say, okay, even if you eat this whole jar, you're not gonna have a really psychoactive effect. Okay, we can put these in dispensaries, and we'll save the macro experience for the guided ceremonies, for the therapeutic sessions, for, again, this ceremonial setting. I don't know. I mean, I might be selfish in that thought.
No, thank you so much, Chris, Katie, and Peter, for all of your thoughts on this. So interestingly enough, there's actually a grassroots ballot initiative campaign underway in Alaska to legalize psychedelics, and the model they're going with jives really well with what you all have been saying makes sense as the ideal policy. So what their policy would do is it would combine decriminalizing, growing, possessing, and sharing natural psychedelics with legalization of guided therapy with the macrodose experiences and legally dispensed microdoses from those therapy centers. So no retail sales per se. You can't just buy an eighth of mushrooms and take them home under this proposed model, but you would be able to legally acquire microdose from one of these therapy centers. You could legally get a facilitated experience, and you could legally grow your own or get some gifted from friends if you wanted to access even a macrodose outside the regulated framework. I'm really happy to shout out this initiative because it's the first indigenous-led drug policy statewide ballot initiative in the United States history. Alaska, I think around 30% of the population is indigenous, so it's really exciting, and I think it's cool how just naturally thinking about this, we kind of came up with something that would look like the model they're proposing up in Alaska. So in terms of the next topic, I wonder if you all have any thoughts on what the best ways are to build community around plant medicine in Massachusetts in particular as we move forward in the wake of this defeat of the ballot measure, as we're looking toward reforms to the Cannabis Control Commission and the structure of the industry here, the rollout of social consumption. What's one of the best ways we can defend the plant, reduce stigma, and build community moving forward in this state? Could we start with you, Katie?
Sure. I think a really natural progression of that would be what's happening now with people using functional mushrooms in cooking, in chocolates and everything, lion's mane and reishi, and the way that they're researching how many benefits those mushrooms have and what different things they can do for you is a natural way to lead into researching psilocybin, because if they're looking at 10 different mushrooms and they're all fantastic. Well, why is one of them illegal? Is there something that's in there that's good like the other ones? And of course there is. So maybe it's a natural way for people to start slow and then really get involved with just changing their perception.
I think community is built through cultural activities. So I think, music, eating, events where it may not be entirely focused on this topic, but where it is maybe introduced or people who are involved can communicate or advocate within communities that already exist or places where people already come together. I think I think the community should be, community built around only sort of psychedelics or only on cannabis. That's a thing I think has been to the downfall of the cannabis community, is that it's very much centered so much around the plant that it's almost the entire identity at this point, when in fact we know most of the consumers who are not in the industry are using it in environments that are not focused on cannabis first. So when it comes to social consumption, I think that there may be, I'm wondering, I think there's social consumption is there should be obviously licenses and availability for social consumption, but I think it's going to work best inside of our established cultural spaces as opposed to newly formed spaces that are entirely built around just the opportunity to smoke weed. Because I just think people want to smoke weed and listen to music or watch a movie or talk to their friends, not just be there for the weed. For the most part, there's a few people, the people here may be different, but the rest of the world, that's my opinion about it.
Yeah, agreed. And I think also if you want to become a part of it, there are already communities existing, right? Especially looking towards the Mass Healths, the Parents for Plant Medicine. There are communities, there's nonprofits already existing in the state that are working towards this. So if you want to get involved, definitely seek those out. And then also have to talk to the component of social media, right? I think it obviously has its pitfalls, but it also has the beautiful ability to connect all of us. And so start seeking out people that have like interests, that are facilitating macro experiences. With us being in Vermont, we're constantly talking to retreat centers, and we're really getting involved with the organizations that are doing the things that we want to be aligned with. So, while that's a business approach, I do a lot of that in my personal life as well. It's just, okay, what's of interest to me? Let's go find it. And so definitely follow us at MYFEELIUM.co on social media. We're constantly sharing stuff from within the community. There's so much information being put out there right now, especially on the topic of psychedelics, and really social media is a great way to stay in the loop of what's happening, especially around policy and legislation and things like that.
Thank you so much, all of you. So we're about to wrap up. I think one of my ideal social consumption sites would probably be a movie theater and concert venue, We'll see if that ever happens, that you're able to buy like gummies in some sort of concession stand. Who knows? But I quickly want to shout out before I leave it to my panelists to do closing comments. I quickly want to shout out my current organizational affiliation. Chris helpfully reminded me. So I'm currently the lead organizer, or the lead educator, I should say, for Mass Healing, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to psychedelics advocacy. And so you can find us at masshealing.org. Anybody who wants to be involved, especially in policy or community building around plant medicine, please reach out to us. That's masshealing.org. And with that, I'll hand over to our panelists to give closing thoughts on the future of cannabis and psychedelics. So let's go back. So let's go, Chris, you first, and then Peter, and then Katie. Thank you.
Deal. I'll keep it short and sweet. It's a super exciting time to be a part of this. The psychedelic industry, primarily revolving around psilocybin, is expected to be a $3.3 billion industry by 2031, if not more. There's so much to be excited about and to sink your teeth into in this space right now. And the more people that we can have out there having the conversations and joining the nonprofits and coming together, the better, because next time this decrim effort is on the ballot, it's not failing. It's not failing again.
It better not. We can't afford another
again.
loss.
Exactly. It's not failing again, and it's going to take all of us having the conversations and getting excited about it and doing all the things. So thank you all very much. At MYFEELIUM.co, website MYFEELIUM.co.
I want to start just thanking Flower Expo and Kai for putting these sessions together. This it's a lot of work, and it's to bring psychedelics into the conversation. This is valuable because there is a lot of people who are cannabis enthusiasts or in this industry who are naturally in relationship with the psychedelic plants as well. I just want to thank everyone here. You're bringing me up to speed a lot on what's going on right now, and it's interesting to hear about. I want to just just advocate for my own business, Howls. We are a plant medicine company. We make a tincture available all over Massachusetts in dispensaries, and we have a Instagram at Howls Medicines, or stop by our booth at B108, talk to Arlene and Jenny about what we're doing, and sign up for our mailing list. That's the best way to get kind of information. If you like some of how I was speaking about speaking today and the approach towards these plant medicines, that's the same approach we bring to cannabis, one that tries to honor the plant first and make sure that we use the most effective techniques that are safest and reliable. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is if you have a relationship with any of these plants and you have a positive relationship with it, tell your friends, talk about it, engage with it, because there might be some conflict, there might be some disagreement, but I think it doesn't need to be in the shadows, this conversation. I think that the more we learn from others and how they're seeing it, the more we can sharpen how we talk about it and properly support the tidal wave that's coming because of the $3.3 billion and counting that people see on the table and want to be a part of. But I think that as people who've seen this cannabis industry, it's important that if you have a relationship with this plant, you make sure that voice is there every time one of those dollars is spent, because we're talking about sustainability for something that is a human right, and that should be at the forefront even as markets are built, because as you can see here, if that's not at the forefront, there can be a lot of uncertainty and stigmatization of the plant due to how it's introduced. So love and peace to everyone here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to stock Howls tincture starting next week, so you can get them delivered with Pineapple Express anywhere in Massachusetts. That allows me to deliver to you. And I also would like to invite you guys to put a guest blog on my website. I'm trying to get more voices and more information out on my website through different blogs, so I'd love to see that. And back to closing remarks for here, I think just keep it simple and listen to the plant. The plant can tell you a lot. It can clean the dirt. It can tell you things that are wrong with your body. So I think keeping it simple and talking to people and listening to the plant is the most important thing we can do.